Hey folks, today we go over the CO2 solution for the 43-gallon tank. That's all coming up right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and today we're going to install the CO2 in the new tank. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the equipment that I've cobbled together for this project, and then we're going to actually put it in there. I'll talk briefly along the way about what certain things do and why I chose to use it. I tried to make it a good mix of a video for people that maybe have never used CO2 before, or have used it a bunch of times and just want to see what I did. Before I go too far, I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Patreons. I actually used a lot of stuff that I had already, and some of this was donated by 7 ports for this particular part of the project, but man, I couldn't have done the rest of this project without your help, and I really appreciate it. I put every cent of it back into content for the channel. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to 7 ports for the regulator and a bunch of the glass products that I used in this video. So let's go to Sean from several days ago and get a look at the install, starting with the equipment. Okay, here we have the items for this project. We've got CO2 resistant tubing. This is important because CO2 can actually creep out of regular tubing and stuff, and it is okay to use maybe for a while, but this is the most efficient. I've also chosen black tubing because it'll go with the dark background that's built into this particular aquarium. You're also going to want a check valve, and this is to keep water from coming back into the system. I'm going to put this just after my bubble counter, kind of close to the top. This is a little glass U-shape, and what it's good for is it makes a nice clean transition from the back of the tank to inside the tank without the tubing getting crimped up or smashed or anything. So it's just made to kind of be a transition point from the back of the tank to inside the tank. This is a little glass bubble counter, and what I do is basically this will go down, and this will go under it, and then the check valve that'll keep the water from going all the way back down, that's going to go underneath it. Yeah, of course, attached by tubing in between all these things. The reason is I let water drain down into here, and this will be a bubble counter that never goes dry, because basically the water, once the CO2 cuts off, some suction will form and it'll come back down there. That's why you want the check valve there, to make sure water doesn't make it all the way back into the regulator that we'll see in a second. But it is okay if it makes it this far, because that way we'll always have water in our bubble counter, and it's just something I like to do. And of course, once we're in the water, we're going to need a way to distribute the bubbles, and that's where you get this little glass diffuser. As you can see, it's got a little ceramic plate, so the CO2 will come through here, bubble up into here, and then this breaks it into lots of little tiny bubbles. And that exposes more surface area of the CO2 to water, which helps it absorb the CO2 into the water all the much better. Makes a nice fine mist of bubbles. And of course, last but not least, we have the CO2 reactor. This particular one has a solenoid valve. What that means is that I can hook this up to power, and I've got a timer. You can use a real simple timer. I'm not sure if this is 3-prong or not, but you can use a real simple kitchen timer or a smart plug or something else that can come on and activate. And I'll turn this on. And typically what you want it to do is to come on about a half an hour before, and this is approximate, you have to use your own judgment, but it'll go on about a half an hour before the lights come on, and then turn off about half an hour or so before the lights go out. That way there's some buildup of CO2 in there when the lights come on, and it's starting to dissipate a little bit as the lights go out, because when the lights go out, the plants start making CO2, and you don't want to usually double up on that by adding more. Something else I've got for this project, and this is kind of optional, but it's so this is Teflon tape, and what you do is you put this around the area where this is going to, on the thread where this is going to screw into the canister. And the canister is kind of huge, so it's off screen. You'll see it here in a second. But I like to put this on to kind of help keep those air gaps from coming out through the screw-in part on the back here. All right, so the best thing to do to get started with this is maybe take a few measurements. You're going to want to know the approximate length of what to cut most of these hoses. There are a few short parts at the beginning that you can sort of guesstimate or kind of hold the hose up to the aquarium and do it that way. That's basically what I would do. I usually eyeball it, especially at the beginning, and then I try to take a measurement once I've got the rest of it in place to get it all the way down into the to go from the tank to the regulator after I got this initial part set up. Now, with a lot of these hoses, you can try to work them on like this with no augmentation at all. Some things it works on and some things it doesn't. Now, what I'm showing you here, besides this really cool mug that I have, is that you can take this thing and put it in some warm water, and it will make it really, really easy to slide it onto different components. And what this is going to do is just going to get it's going to take that plastic and kind of make it more pliable, so you're able to stick it onto other things. This little U shape was really, really tough to attach it to. It was really hard to get the hose on there. So adding that hot water to it made it a lot easier. It made it a lot easier to get on there. There's something else that I never see anybody talk about either with the CO2. If that thing's been in a curved shape for a really long time and you want it to be a straighter shape, you have the option of taking that hose and just dipping the entire thing into the cup. And what that will do is let it'll let that thing warm up, and then you can just kind of hold it straight. You let it sit in there for maybe 30 or 40 seconds, something like that, maybe even less time than that, and then just kind of pull it straight, and you can get that curve out of there, especially if it's causing you problems in your installation. That's me blowing on it to kind of cool it off. You can cool it off and it'll start to get in the shape it's supposed to be in. But that's just a handy tip for getting some of those components the way you'd like them to be on there. Now what I'm doing is I've got to make a little short section that goes from that U shape over to the bubble counter, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop this thing in there and let it warm up. So after we get the bubble counter sorted, the next thing to do is to install the check valve. You want to make sure the little arrow at the top is going in the direction of the air. Nothing is going to be able to go the opposite direction past that little checkpoint. So now I've got that installed along with the bubble counter. We're going to go ahead and put this on the U shape, which I believe will just slide right on here. It's already been heated up and stuff, or maybe it needs a little bit more. So the next step is to work with the canister. It usually has a little protective cap there. This is where I use that tape, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out a little section, and I'm going to wrap it around the screw part there. And what that'll do is it just kind of makes a little bit of a gasket on that screw-in piece. Now, I like to kind of get it at least one layer thick. I just kind of rip it off and press it down, and it works really good. This part I like to take off. You don't want that to be activated when you put this thing on, so I take that off, and these little gaskets that come with it are going to get inserted into this part here that screws onto the canister. And so you can see how it just kind of fits down inside of there. You want to make sure that's inside of there, and then go ahead and screw it on the canister. I like to start it with my fingers, and then you're going to want to take a wrench and finish it off and get it nice and tight on there. I used a Robo Grip. I don't advise using things like this because they tend to eat up that copper and kind of make it kind of make it rough and stuff. A wrench is a much better tool for that. I couldn't find my wrench. I know I've got it somewhere, but I couldn't find my big wrench that I usually use for this. I didn't feel like waiting any longer, so I went ahead and took care of it right now. Notice on the bottom of this is the solenoid. This solenoid is what plugs into a timer, and it is a 3-prong, by the way. But you'll notice it plugs into the timer, and that's what turns it on and off. This little piece down at the bottom is where the air hose is going to go in that we were working with before. You're going to take that little metal piece off, and it's going to slip down onto the hose. Now, after you've got that all installed and stuff, you slowly open up the valve and see that you've got some pressure there. After that checks out and it's okay, then you can go ahead and screw on this other valve here and go ahead and get pressure moving over to the other side. The solenoid's closed, so nothing's going to go anywhere. Until that solenoid's plugged in to an electrical outlet, that solenoid's going to stay shut. So now take notice that this is moving. So on this one, I took it up to about 3.5, and that seems to be working really well for me so far. So now you take the hose that came in from the tank and you're going to slide that nut onto the end of it and then attach it to the piece of copper, then slide the nut down and screw it on there. Of course, I didn't show you the whole process there, but it's pretty easy to figure out. Then you want to make sure that your canister is safely tucked underneath your aquarium. It can be problematic if it gets knocked over, so make sure if you're in a place where people are going to be getting in and out of there that you might want to even strap it down. I've seen some people strap it down. You'll see all the fine bubbles coming off of that diffuser. It's really handy if you've got it kind of near where the water's flowing and you can get the water to kind of flow and push those bubbles around even more. So you want to adjust the air coming out of that regulator to about 1 bubble a second to start with. If you have a bigger tank, you might need a little bit more, or a smaller tank, you might need a bit less. But about 1 bubble per second seems to be working for me. And of course, look how those bubbles kind of mist into the water. Perfect. So what you're looking at here is indicator solution. And you use this CO2 indicator solution to kind of give yourself a rough idea of how your CO2 is doing. Now, what this actually measures is pH. And all these drop checkers kind of work the same. You're going to put some indicator solution in there, and then there's going to be an air gap between the water and the solution. And this solution interacts with the oxygen between the water and the solution, and it'll change that solution's color. Note that it's not quite deep enough there in that part of the video. I needed to top off the water. Eventually I got it topped off. You see how it's kind of a light green now as compared to that blue color it was before? That means that there's plenty of CO2 getting in there. Of course, I've got it right over the top. I probably need to move that checker around to the other side of the tank. But you'll see it fits really nicely on this rimless tank. But there are a lot of different kinds. There's some that go inside, and you've seen them on my channel before and probably other places. But there's a lot of different ways to kind of mount one of these. It is important to note that they don't work right away. It's going to take a little time. And that is just about it. Probably the only other thing I will do with this setup is maybe install a smart plug. I got one of these for Christmas a while back, and it came with 2 of these little smart plugs that apparently you can use with Alexa. I don't actually have an Alexa, but I was wondering if I could do it with my Amazon TV. I'm going to look into this a little bit more. Maybe I'll give you some feedback later. Right now, I've just got a mechanical timer. Of course, I had to go dig up a timer that's 3-pronged because the solenoid is 3 prongs. I think it would be really cool if I could get one of these things working too, so I might piddle around with that over the next couple of weeks. It's a little too early to go, oh wow, CO2 made a huge difference in here. And me starting it out pretty early probably means that I won't really know the difference for a while. But with all these nutrients in the soil, these plants have an opportunity to grow like crazy, but they need the building blocks to do that. And that's what adding CO2 does for your aquarium, is it kind of gives you those building blocks, as the raw material that it needs to make new plants. I'm definitely going to add a lid. The evaporation in this has just been tremendous. Right now I'm just siphoning off the 210 whenever it gets a little bit too low, which it's starting to get again. The biggest issue with that too is you get this film that comes up when things evaporate, because it's slowly leaving behind calcium deposits. So I really hate evaporation. It's just a lot more work for me, and it causes some really ugly calcium deposits that I hate to see. So do you have any tips for CO2? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. So this will be my last video for several weeks. As you guys know, I've been putting together the water change companion, and that's going to run for about 5 weeks. Maybe, is it 5, 6 weeks? Anyway, about 5 weeks. That's all going to start a week from this Sunday. It's going to be a lot of content for a few weeks, because there's going to be a lot of snippets of episodes followed by full-length episodes of different interviews I've done. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see more. I will be back with an update on this as soon as I come back. That'll probably be my first thing. I'll either do an update on this, or I'll do maybe an all aquarium update to kind of let people know I'm still alive. But until then, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. So what did you think of the CO2 setup? If there's one, so do you have any tips? So this is actually